Ohio State has filled not one, not two, but three of its coaching openings. It really only had two, and now it's filled three. This is Lettermen Row. This is Mick Walker. This is Spencer Holbrook. We're going to talk offensive staff changes because the defensive coordinator position is still open. Offensive staff had two openings. Chip Kelly off to the NFL, going to the Las Vegas Raiders. I still want to say Oakland Raiders, Mick. So Justin Fry is with the Arizona Cardinals in the NFL. Chip Kelly, obviously, with the Raiders. And Ohio State decides that Brian Hartline is going to be its offensive coordinator. Quarterback's assistant Billy Fessler is going to be the quarterback's coach. And the Buckeyes have gone outside the tree to hire Tyler Bowen, the Virginia Tech offensive coordinator and play caller, to be the offensive line coach, likely the run game coordinator, according to Pete Nakos. This is all expected hires, nothing official yet from Ohio State, but these are the moves that are expected to become official in the coming days. Mick's going to talk about the recruiting side. I'm going to talk about the team side. We're going to bring it all together and talk offensive staff changes. It is, of course, Thursday morning. It is Lettermen Row. A lot to get to here, Mick. Where do you want to start? Do you want to start with Hartline? Do you want to start with Fessler, and then we can get into Bowen, or would you rather just dive right into the recruiting side of this offensive line thing like everybody else wants to?
Let's start with Bowen, just because I think he's probably the most interesting guy, the guy that we know the least about, which automatically makes him the most interesting. Upon the hiring, after doing some of the recruiting reactions and talking to some guys, I went back and looked at, I know we're both a fan of his name's Parker Fleming. You can follow him on Twitter at StatsAwar. He puts out some good analytical stuff. So I remember recently he put out a chart of yards before contact that rushing attacks average. And Ohio State was, I believe, about 2.5 yards before contact, which is a pretty good, or it might have been 2.75-ish. Right behind them was Virginia Tech this past season with 2.5 yards. Now, they had a very talented running back in Bashal Tootin, who also made them go pretty high up vertically on the graphic with yards after contact. But I think this running game under Tyler Bowen will do a good job of running an offense that gets yards without contact, opening up lanes, creating holes for the running backs like James Peoples, C.J. Donaldson, some of these guys that are coming in, Bo Jackson, Isaiah West, Anthony Turbo Rogers. Some of these guys will do pretty well in a system under Tyler Bowen. I'm also excited to see what he does with this offensive line. It has to be very nice for him to come in and have a starting center, have 3 guards that you can play at 2 spots, or be bringing in 2 of the better transfer portal offensive tackles and have a nice redshirt freshman offensive tackle that's kind of been brewing there. So he's coming in with a pretty stacked room. We can definitely say that Justin Fry left the room in a better place than he found it. So I'm excited to see what he can kind of build on there. And he's just the most interesting one because we don't know much about him, but beyond kind of the ancillary, like entry-level stuff.
Well, he's got a very long resume, CV, if you will, of stops. So let's just get to the very basics here, because there are some people who watch the YouTube channel that are not on LettermenRow.com. Couldn't be me. Go to LettermenRow.com. But if you are only on the YouTube channel, that's fine. Just make sure you come to LettermenRow.com. We'll get you taken care of over there. Tyler Bowen, from Eastern Georgia, South Georgia, basically, went to the University of Maryland for his playing career, played offensive line at Maryland, then became a student assistant because of injuries, then became a graduate assistant. He was the tight ends coach at Towson. Then he was a graduate assistant at Penn State in 2014. He goes and becomes the offensive line coach at Fordham in 2015. He's the offensive coordinator in 2016 at Fordham. That's his first, run as an offensive coordinator was at Fordham. Okay, then he goes back to Maryland as the offensive line coach in 2017. James Franklin hires him to Penn State for 2018 and 19, the tight ends coach, the offensive recruiting coordinator. That's where he begins to flourish under James Franklin in the Penn State recruiting department. He was the interim offensive coordinator in 2019 for Penn State. 2020, he's the co-offensive coordinator, the offensive recruiting coordinator, the tight ends coach. Then all of a sudden, old friend of the show, Urban Meyer, hires him to become the Jacksonville Jaguars tight end coach in 2021. You can see this guy start to really raise his level of where he's going in his career. 2022, because obviously we know how the Urban Meyer thing ended in the NFL. 2022, Brent Pry, who had seen Tyler Bowen work at Penn State, Brent Pry, the former Penn State defensive coordinator, watched Tyler Bowen on the offensive side and said, hey, I want that guy on my Virginia Tech staff. In 2022, he's hired as the offensive coordinator and the tight ends coach. In 2023 and 2024, the last 2 years, Virginia Tech has had Tyler Bowen calling plays. He's been the quarterback's coach and the offensive play caller. Worked with Kyron Drones, the Baylor transfer, who became a pretty good quarterback for Virginia Tech. Again, a long list of places that Tyler Bowen has been, and everywhere he goes, the kind of the rub on this guy is like, hey, really, really good recruiter and rising star in the coaching profession. I had somebody reach out to me yesterday and tell me that they think he'll be an offensive coordinator for a long time in college football. There's a chance that, there are people who think that one day he'll be the offensive coordinator or even one of the main coaches, maybe even head coach. Who knows where his career goes at Penn State just because of his connections to James Franklin. So all that's to say, Mick, like Ryan Day went out and found a guy with 10 to 15 years, depending on how you look at it, coaching experience, who is also not even 40, who has a lot of experience as an offensive play caller. Does that sound familiar? Sounds a little bit like Ryan Day to me. Obviously not the NFL pedigree that Ryan Day had, a couple stops in the NFL there. Not as many years calling plays as Ryan Day had, but it is kind of interesting. And now, for the first time in a few years, Tyler Bowen will be coaching the offensive line. He hasn't coached offensive line since he coached that Maryland unit in 2017. But you know what? Ryan Day trusts this guy to be his offensive line coach and, more importantly, his offensive line recruiter. And I think that says a lot. But also, he'll be the run game coordinator. He's called plays before. I like this hire, Mick. Obviously, we don't know if it's going to work out because we never know if a coaching hire is going to work out. But I like it.
Yeah, I think we kind of got called on it yesterday with the Brian Hartline news when it broke. The story had kind of been pre-written for a couple of days, so we were preparing for this kind of news to happen. This chain of news, obviously, Tyler Bowen was not something we were super prepared for, except for when the news started to trickle out yesterday. But while we were talking about the elevation of potentially Brian Hartline being the offensive coordinator, you and I constantly talked about if you're going to do this, you need an offensive line coach that has some kind of ability to be a run game coordinator, not just in title, but somebody that can help you actually orchestrate the run game. Obviously, Ryan Day can do that. I imagine Carlos Loughlin has his takes and opinions and scouting points on the run game. You have other guys where we can get into analysts and off fields, the guys that could probably come in and help. I imagine there's theories everyone who they could really add off the field, but you needed somebody that could add to the run game, and it feels like that's what Tyler Bowen does. And also, like you said, he adds as a recruiter a lot. He adds a pretty big X factor on the recruiting show when it comes to just the effort he kind of puts in, the energy he puts in. Steve Wiltfong spoke with Lettermen Row yesterday, the On3's vice president of transfer portal and recruiting. He kind of spoke about the thoroughness that Tyler Bowen works with, the eye for talent. And I also spoke with former Penn State offensive lineman who has since medically retired and gone into kind of the media lane of things. And that's Landon Tingwall, who Tyler Bowen recruited to Penn State, even though he was the tight ends coach, and Landon spoke really highly of him as a recruiter. That story will be up on Lettermen Row later today, but he's just a guy that brings a lot of energy, I think, on the trail of thoroughness, like I said. And I think he's already started working with some of these guys he potentially knew from being at Virginia Tech, started already kind of contacting him. The other interesting thing that just is kind of a nugget of information is he was in Ohio last week visiting on 300 Cincinnati Archbishop Moeller quarterback Matt Ponataski, who Ohio State hosted for a game this season. Billy Fessler, who we can talk about in a minute, was also down seeing Matt Ponataski last week while they were on the road. And Tyler Bowen actually offered him as the quarterback's coach at Virginia Tech. So maybe that input gets to Billy Fessler's ear. I mean, there's a lot of different layers when it comes to O-line recruiting, quarterback recruiting. He also had his hand in tight end. So I imagine there's some takes and some opinions and evaluations he'll bring with him as a recruiter. But he's also just going to bring a lot of energy, a lot of attention to detail, which I think Ohio State fans will appreciate. And I think Ryan Day liked when it comes to adding him to the coaching staff.
Well, and I think that it also helps, like the Buckeyes recruit the DMV so much. And Tyler Bowen's specialty from his time at Maryland, obviously as a player, from his time at Penn State, and then being at Virginia Tech, like it doesn't get much more DMV than your three stops in Power 4 football being Virginia Tech, Maryland, and Penn State. So, like, this guy knows what he's doing in the DMV. I think that helps a lot. Two of the guys that you've already mentioned that he reached out to were Darius Gray, who is the number 27 overall prospect in the entire country, the number 3 interior offensive lineman, the number 2 player in the state of Virginia. Obviously, you put the Ohio State brand power with the relationship that he's built with Darius Gray. That wouldn't surprise me if that recruitment starts to turn in Ohio State's direction with Tyler Bowen. And that things can move quickly with new hires, guys. Like it wouldn't surprise me. And then Carter Scruggs from Loudoun County, that's as DMV as it gets. The number 136 overall player, the number 10 interior offensive lineman. Like, that's a guy who Ohio State hasn't really been in the mix for. that all of a sudden Tyler Bowen might put you in the mix for a top 150 guy from right there in the DMV, that all of a sudden, like, that's looking like a Penn State, Virginia Tech, maybe that Eastern Seaboard battle, and all of a sudden the Midwest comes in, it's like, hey, we're Ohio State, let's go, man. None of this stuff would surprise me. And then you mix in the fact that Ohio State's got these really talented tackles in this class, the Max Rileys and the Adam Guthries. Like, you can start to see this board already filling itself out with a new offensive line coach, and it hasn't even been 18 hours. So, like, you know, I just think it's kind of interesting where, like, you know, you can see the deck chairs, I guess, being reshuffled, except it's not the Titanic. It looks like a ship that could be for the long haul. Like, I just think that the recruiting side of this is so interesting, and we'll obviously see what he does with the offensive line. I think there's definitely a need, Mick, to bring in like an experienced offensive line coach to work with Tyler Bowen, just because he hasn't been an offensive line coach since 2017. That doesn't mean he doesn't know what he's doing. I'm not saying that at all, but I do think that there's a need for an experienced offensive line coach to be alongside him, a la Tim Drevno and Mike Soleni with Justin Fry this year. But I really like the hire of Tyler Bowen. So,
yeah, I think you mentioned it there, Tim Drevno. I imagine there will be a couple pieces supplemented in, whether it's a high-end offensive line guy there. I imagine there'll probably also be a guy like Mike Soleni who comes in, younger guy that kind of studies under Tyler Bowen, brings some energy as an assistant on the recruiting trail. So that's a big one. And like you said, I'm interested to follow because the board for offensive line under Justin Fry was kind of stacked pretty obviously. It was, hey, you have these three in-state guys who are really like, we're going to go all in on Jackson Cantwell. That seems like the five-star guy. They're like, hey, let's go in on. They really like Felix Ojo out of Texas. Those are their two big out-of-state offensive tackles. They liked Darius Gray, and then there's some other guys. Like, I really liked Deron Parks when he was in West Virginia. He's since moved to Florida, and Justin Fry continued to recruit him. But does Tyler Bowen come in and say, I like Deron Parks, but I like Carter Scruggs better? So just Carter Scruggs is now the guy that I'm looking at for this 5th, 6th spot, maybe on the offensive line. And I think Carter Scruggs, who visited Virginia Tech 5 times in the past 12 months or 13 months, is probably interested in that fact. So keeping up with those type of things on the recruiting trail is interesting. I was doing some social media sleuthing late last night on Tyler Bowen's page, and 4 of the 5 most recent follows, I believe, on his page are Jackson Cantwell, Felix Ojo, Sam Greer, and Max Riley. So, like, you can kind of see the direct correlation of, like, these are the guys. Like I said, he's going to bring Carter Scruggs. He's going to bring some other guys, I imagine, that he liked from Virginia Tech over. But there's the base of the board is still going to be the same thing. It's going to be up to him helping now Ryan Day and the rest of his coaching staff to finalize that. And I would fully expect that some of these guys, if the news maybe gets official today or if it gets official sometime soon, they'll be among the people that Tyler Bowen calls over the phone, because any initial contact's kind of just been text about, hey, I don't know if you saw, I got this new opportunity. Let's talk about it here soon. Like, it's mainly just been initial text to introduce himself. And I imagine here soon we'll start hearing about calls. And obviously in March, I'd expect we see a lot of these offensive linemen come up to visit to meet Tyler Bowen, to kind of see what he's all about on the board, on the field as a recruiter. And that's something that Steve Wilfall and Landon Tingle, everybody's talked really highly about Tyler Bowen, the person, as a recruiter. So that should be a pretty easy spot once you can get him on campus.
One thing that I think we need to talk about, Mick, during all of this football conversation, with all of this talk about Tyler Bowen, with all this talk about the coaching changes, is Ohio State hoops. We don't talk much hoops here, but the Buckeyes are at home Thursday night. If you don't have tickets yet, go to the Game Time app, gametime.co. It's the place to get your tickets. The Game Time Picks feature lets you sort through tickets with ease. If you go to the Game Time app or at gametime.co right now, you can find incredibly cheap tickets to Ohio State, Maryland on Thursday night in the Schottenstein Center. They are as low as $5. And guess what? I can save you $20 if you go to gametime.co right now, or the Game Time app, use the promo code ON3, you get $20 off your first purchase. That basically gets you in the door for free at the Shot. You can go watch Deebs and the boys try to beat Maryland. Maryland beat them by 24 earlier in the year. Now the Buckeyes all of a sudden on a heater, playing pretty well, playing good basketball, just pushed Illinois to the brink in Champaign at the State Farm Center. Not an easy place to win. Buckeyes have a road win over Purdue. They've got a neutral site win over Kentucky. Go to the Game Time app and gametime.co. Go see those Buckeyes in person. Pack the Shot. Be a nice little time on Thursday night if you are so inclined. The Game Time app and the gametime.co, it's the place to go for all your ticketing needs. And I'm sure that you've all noticed what I'm wearing today. You love what I'm wearing today. I love what I'm wearing today. I wear it almost every show. I wear a different version of the Rhoback Active hoodie because Rhoback Activewear is my favorite thing on the planet, aside from maybe like Ohio State football and my wife. But that's another story for another time. It's Rhoback Activewear. There's only one way to describe Rhoback, and I can attest to it because I've had Rhoback since before we started partnering with them. Best fit, best feel. For those who aren't familiar with Rhoback, they are completely changing the game with their incredibly comfortable activewear. Rhoback just released during football season the new licensed game day collection. It's awesome. There's novel polos. You can get Script Ohio all over the polos. You can get this hoodie, but in scarlet with the block O right here. Nobody else on the market is pairing this level of custom design with these quality activewear. I also, in the middle of the winter, it doesn't matter. I wear Rhoback's everyday shorts. They're the perfect pairing with the hoodie because when I'm in my house and it's cold outside, but it's warm in my house, I can wear the active shorts with these hoodies. No better pairing in the world. They also have the appearance of a nice short, but the comfort of an athletic short. Rhoback has been proudly leading the NIL charge. Caleb Downs has a Rhoback deal. If you use the code Lettermen20 on Rhoback.com, that's right, Lettermen, Lettermen 20, the number 20 at Rhoback.com, you get a generous 20% off for all new customers throughout the end of the week. That's spelled RHOBACK, RHOBACK.com. That's 20% off all performance polos, shorts, and more. This hoodie right here, 20% off with the promo code Lettermen20, 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 20% off all your Rhoback needs. Rhoback is my favorite company. My wife started buying me Rhoback in 2020 or 2021, and I wear Rhoback almost every single day. Luckily, they just decided that we needed to partner up together, and now they sell Ohio State gear. They have things for every occasion. I play golf almost every time I tee it up. I'm in Rhoback activewear. So yeah, it's one of the best products on the market. I cannot recommend it enough. So yeah, go to Rhoback.com, use the code Lettermen20 for 20% off your first order at Rhoback.com, RHOBACK.com. All right, Mick. So we've talked Tyler Bowen, obviously what he does for the current offensive line room. We don't really know because he hasn't coached offensive line, but he's recruited really well in the offensive line. But now we shift gears because Ohio State also has a new offensive coordinator. Ohio State also has a new quarterbacks coach. Let's start. I don't think there's a lot of conversation that needs to be had with the quarterbacks coach. I think there's more with Brian Hartline. So let's knock out the Billy Fessler of all this. Here's the deal, man. Billy Fessler is the youngest coach on the staff now. Really young, up-and-coming mind. He's worked for 3 offensive minds that you might have heard of. Joe Moorhead, who was an incredible offensive coordinator at Penn State and at Oregon, then became the head coach at Mississippi State, was good with his offenses there, then was the head coach at Akron, and he coaches at Akron like it's hard to win at Akron. But he's one of the best offensive minds in the country. He promoted Billy Fessler at 2 different stops. Okay? So then Chip Kelly sees Billy Fessler and grabs him off of the Akron staff and says, you're going to be my quarterback's coach at UCLA, except I'm going to leave in 1 month. And then Ryan Day says, well, bring him along with you, Chip. So Billy Fessler goes from the quarterback's coach at UCLA to an assistant quarterback coach under Ryan Day. That's 3 different offensive minds. Ryan Day, Chip Kelly, Joe Moorhead have all promoted this guy. He does something right. So you can doubt whether he's ready to be a quarterback's coach at this level. You can doubt whether he can recruit at this level. That's fine. I'm just telling you the 3 different offensive minds that have forgotten more about football today than I have learned in my entire life have promoted this guy. So I'm going to say that they know what they're doing. And I would say that, this is one of those in Ryan Day you have to trust hires because you don't really know a lot about this guy.
Yeah, and I think a couple big things here on the recruiting trail wise. I think he's a guy that built a lot of relationships. Last week when they were on the road, Jim Knowles was obviously had the part of the program to become the defensive coordinator at Penn State. Billy Fessler was the guy that was subbed in for Jim Knowles to be able to go see some local quarterbacks. He saw Nathan Bernard out of Ashland, was in Pennsylvania seeing Peyton Falzone, who was Tyler Bowen's former Virginia Tech quarterback commit out of Nazareth, a 4-star kid that is really athletic, that could play quarterback, could play tight end in college. Billy Fessler saw him. He made the trip down to Salina, Texas to go see Bo Bentley, who was the guy that tore it up at the Navy All-American Bowl. He also went and saw 5-star quarterback Ryder Lyons out of Folsom, California. So Billy Fessler was on the road every day. Again, I mentioned earlier he saw Matt Ponatoski as well. Tommy Carr, the grandson of Lloyd Carr, former Michigan head coach, Billy Fessler went up and saw him. So it was a busy week last week seeing Midwest, Texas, and California quarterbacks for Billy Fessler. I think he's going to do a good job on the recruiting trail. I think the other big thing is we like to talk a lot about when it comes to the offensive coordinator, Ryan Day handing over the play sheet. There's also capacity of handing over the quarterback room. And I think really last season and then going forward, but I think Billy Fessler had a big role in it last season, worked with Will Howard. I think he's going to continue to have a big role in it this upcoming season. And that's something that's big for Ryan Day to hand over as well, is being able to coach those guys daily. Yeah, if he's not going to be able to do that, he has to get somebody he trusts. And I think Billy Fessler has now been proven time and time again because of the people that he's been hired by and the places he's worked, that he is somebody that these offensive minds trust to work daily with guys like Julian Sand, Lincoln Keenholz, Tavian St. Clair, the whole gamut of quarterbacks in the Ohio State quarterback room.
I think this also makes it more likely that Ohio State will find a veteran quarterback presence to bring in from either the spring transfer portal or somebody who's still in the portal, like as far as like just a veteran who has played a lot of football, who knows how, and could be in that Chris Chuganoff line or in that oh my gosh, the name is slipped. Tristan Gebbia line of thinking for in 2023 when there were young quarterbacks in the room who didn't have a lot of experience. Gebbia had played a lot of football. They bring him in. He's now a GA, I believe, at Oregon State where he played his college ball. But he was a glorified GA for Ohio State, was the third-string quarterback behind Kyle McCord and Devin Brown. I think that is a scenario that you could see happening under Billy Fessler. We'll see what happens there. I just think that there's not much else to say other than you have to trust Brian Day here because he just watched Billy Fessler work under Chip Kelly for a year in that quarterback room, and he was impressed enough to keep him around. Like quarterback coach at Ohio State, it's a pretty sought after position, and you say what you want about Corey Dennis and I think that had deserved some ridicule just because Ryan just kind of promoted Corey when he was hired at Ohio State, but this, I think Billy Fessler has truly earned this opportunity to be a quarterback's coach. And you can say that your first opportunity as a position coach shouldn't come at Ohio State, and I completely understand that side of the argument. But if Ryan Day and Joe Moorhead and Chip Kelly all look at this guy and say, that guy knows what he's doing with quarterbacks, I trust him. And, so we'll see where it goes. And now let's get into the Brian Hartline of all of this, Mick, because 2 years ago, Ryan Day floated the idea of giving up play calling and making Brian Hartline the offensive coordinator. He actually did make Hartline the offensive coordinator. They tried some play calling stuff in the spring, and then Day continued to call plays. In 2024, Ryan Day wanted to give up play calling officially. Instead of having Hartline do it, he entrusted Chip Kelly to call plays for him, and they won a national championship. I don't believe Ryan Day will go back to calling plays because he saw the results of him as a CEO and not being in the play sheet all the time. So now I think it's on Brian Hartline to show that he can be a play caller at the highest level of the sport. And it's an opportunity that Hartline has earned. We don't know if he's going to be good at it, but he's definitely earned it from cutting his teeth in that wide receiver room, showing he can recruit. Now he gets to spread his arms into the recruiting of all of these offensive positions. And so you can doubt whether he'll be good at it. You can wonder how the receivers are going to be if Brian Hartline's not, in the play sheet instead of in the receiver room. But I think no matter what, you can't say that Hartline didn't earn the opportunity to prove himself as a play caller here. And that's why he's getting this opportunity.
Yeah, and I think the big debate obviously is what you and I both agree he's earned the opportunity. The debate then goes to the first opportunity, should it come at a place like Ohio State? That's the big debate, and you guys can debate that amongst yourselves. I really don't have an opinion. He's going to get the opportunity, so we're just going to cover it and report on it how we can. I think he will do a good job. I think obviously adding Tyler Bowen in to help with the run game is useful. I was thinking about it too while we were talking about Billy Fessler. Is it Paul Rhodes? Is it Paul Rhodes, the gentleman that was the coach that was on staff a few years ago that helped with the quarterbacks as well?
No, that was Paul Rhodes was a defensive assistant.
Okay.
You're thinking of Todd Fitch.
Okay. There's always the opportunity, especially with these coaching changes right now and guys not having jobs. Old offensive coordinators, coaches that are respected in the offensive game plan, whether that's Kevin Wilson or somebody else that could come into the Ohio State program and work with whether it's quarterbacks or game planning out. Ohio State, I imagine, will do something to supplement experience, offensive game planning, and different things onto this coaching staff to make sure Brian Hartline has every opportunity to succeed in this first season. And like you mentioned, I think there's part of Ryan Day that wants to be more of the CEO, but I imagine there's also part of him that understands that when he was able to kind of lock in and be a schematic guy during the playoff, there was a big boost to it. So there has to be some kind of balance struck there with, hey, I need to be able to help organize passing concepts and organize the offense, but I also need to make sure that when we're rotating defensive linemen in the fourth quarter, I need to be there with Larry Johnson to make sure, hey, I give my opinion. Or when Rob Keys and Gunnar Daniel are organizing a punt block, I know that where the up back or where I know where the end's coming from, and I'm helping organize that. So there's a blend that Ryan Day still has to figure out, and that's part of being now a $12.5 million coach. He's going to figure that out on the job. But like you said, I think you have to just you have to trust at some point what Ryan Day is going to make a decision on as offensive coordinator. And you have to, if everybody likes Brian Hartline, like I think they do, I think you have to give him an opportunity at some point to be the offensive coordinator and call plays and at least see how it works out. If it doesn't work, Ryan Day has now shown us that he's willing to make changes, and he will make changes if it doesn't work. So give him Brian Hartline this year. Let him allow him to kind of excel into that next step of coaching. And if he takes to it, we'll do pretty well. He'll do pretty well on the field and on the recruiting trail, like you said.
Just for the record, because everything ties back to Athens, Ohio. Todd Fitch is now the quarterbacks coach and offensive coordinator for Tim Albin at Charlotte. Tim Albin, of course, coming from Ohio. So just because you brought it up, I had to bring it up. This is my question about Brian Hartline as a play caller. Does this apply? What's the default? Is the default for Brian Hartline to target his receivers, which I don't blame him. When the game was on the line on 3rd and 11 in the national championship game, they threw it deep to Jeremiah Smith, and they'll have Jeremiah Smith for 2 more years, barring something unforeseen. So is that the default, or is this going to be a pass-happy offense, or what's the run game here? I think that ties into Tyler Bowen coming in and keeping this running game improving. They averaged 180 yards on the ground a game last year at Virginia Tech. I think it's going to be very important for Tyler Bowen and Brian Hartline to get on the same page with the run game, blending with the passing game that Hartline and Day have with the run game of Tyler Bowen. It was very, very evident in the college football playoff that they were marrying Ryan Day's passing concepts with Chip Kelly's run game. I think that's going to be critical for this team in 2025 with a new quarterback, new offensive coordinator, new offensive line coach, new running backs. That's just on my mind here. Like how does this all gel together? And you're not losing Hartline as a recruiter of wide receivers. As long as he's at Ohio State's going to get 5-star wide receivers. And you're not losing anything from the wide receiver room because Hartline will still have his hand in that wide receiver room working with those guys, with Devin Jordan, even with Keenan Bailey, who works with some of the receivers still as a tight ends coach. My big question here with this entire staff construction is the oldest guy in the room is now Carlos Loughlin at 47 years old. Is there a guy old enough in the room, or is there a veteran presence in that room who has enough coaching experience, who has been through these wars before, like a Kevin Wilson a few years ago, where he could say like, hey, we did this at Miami, Ohio back in about 25 years ago against this look, or a Chip Kelly who said, hey, when I was at Oregon, Arizona State ran this, we did this off of it. That kind of stuff does matter. And again, Tyler Bowen has been a coach now for 15 years, even though he's only in his mid-30s. Hartline has been around for 8-9 years now at Ohio State. Ryan Day is going to be in that room working with these guys to make sure the offense runs smoothly. But Carlos Loughlin's only been a coach at the Power 4 level since like 2019 or 2020. Keenan Bailey has only ever been at Ohio State as far as like his actual coaching career, not counting GA stuff. So I do just question, like, how much of a need is it to bring in like a true veteran offensive guy to help them? And again, I bring up Kevin Wilson because he is now a free agent. He bought the Cigars to the national championship team. He was there for that run. He saw it firsthand. Like, does Ryan Day choose to bring him back? Or does Ryan Day have another offensive analyst like a Todd Fitch up his sleeve to bring in to help with this offense, as they have one of the youngest coaching staffs you'll ever see at an Ohio State level?
Yeah, I think that's a big question. The biggest question I would have about the whole thing is, how do Tyler Bowen and Brian Hartline kind of marry together? Because the last thing you would want for any quarterback, Julian Sayin, Lincoln Keenan, whoever it may be this season, is to have a situation where the play call that comes through is delayed or issued or anything. Like, there's a infighting amongst that, and you also don't want it running through Ryan Day finally to have to check it off. You want it to be able to set up where, hey, Brian Hartline's calling the plays. We organize the game plan during the week. It goes from Brian Hartline's mouth into Julian Sand's ear, and now we're running the play. It doesn't need to cross through everything. So the marriage of how that organizational structure is going to work is probably the thing I'm most fascinated to watch. Obviously, that kind of leads into like little minute things. Is Brian Hartline on the field? Is he in the box? Tyler Bowen, is he on the field in the box? And then, like you said, if they honestly could both be in the field, you got a guy like Kevin Wilson, he's up in the box now. Like, I don't know how all those layers work, but it's probably what spring, and luckily, sadly for Ohio State, there's no Western Michigan or Akron to start off with. You're going right into Colin Simmons and the Texas Longhorns week 1 coming into the shoe. So it's going to be a trial by fire early. Luckily, that's the perk of the new 12-team college football playoff. You have time to figure it out between week 1 and the postseason, but still, you got to figure it out through spring ball and fall practices as well.
Yeah, it's just a lot of questions about this staff, but also a lot of promise for this staff. There's a lot of enthusiasm. The recruiting should be maybe better. I don't know if we can say that for sure just yet, but there's a chance that the recruiting gets better because Tyler Bowen as a recruiter is what he's known for. It's not to knock Justin Fry, but I think we can all say there's been shortcomings along offensive line recruiting. We'll see if they rectify those into 2026 class. Tyler Bowen, of course, we talked about that at the beginning of the show. Billy Fessler. We talked about Brian Hartline. We talked about Roback Activewear. We talked about GameTime.co and going to the Ohio State basketball game tonight. So much ground to cover at LettermenRow.com. Oh, by the way, Ryan Day got a contract extension, like you said. Maybe we'll talk about that on Friday because the news just never stops at Ohio State. No days off. That's what Lettermen Row is designed for. Mick Walker on the other side of your screen. He's covering recruiting 365 days a year for LettermenRow.com, along with Alex Gleitman. And then there's just me, Spencer Holbrook. I will see you guys over at LettermenRow.com. Become a member today. $1 for your first 7 days. That's right, $1 for your first 7 days. We have a boatload of coverage. Yes, a boatload of coverage from the hiring of Tyler Bowen, from the promotion of Billy Fessler, from the promotion of Brian Hartline to offensive coordinator, and Ryan Day's contract extension. Mick's going to have the recruiting side of all of that covered. I'll have the team side of all of that covered at LettermenRow.com. Again, $1 for your first 7 days. Go to LettermenRow.com. We'll see you guys over there at Lettermen Row.